Her name was Sierra, and on the night they dragged her toward the upper ridge, every step she took echoed with the same sharp, brittle sound she'd feared since childhood. The faint cracking defrosts beneath her skin-thin boots. That sound would become her companion, her tormentor, her witness. Long before the cold swallowed her breath, the frost was already speaking for her, whispering the truth she wasn't allowed to say out loud. That none of this was a test of bravery. It was a sentence disguised as the ice endurance trial, a ritual older than memory, enforced by a mountain tribe that believed nature could pass verdicts where their elders could not. Women were laid upon frozen ground or shallow snow for hours, sometimes for entire nights, to judge their spiritual worth. They called it cleansing. They called it destiny. They called it nature's judgment. But the frost, cracking softly under Sierra's weight, knew better. It had hurt too many women break before it ever did. Sierra had always been told she was destined for this trial. Her mother had survived one, her aunt had not. Her sister had lost 2 toes and half her hope. And now Sarah, barely grown, was being marched up the mountain slope under torchlight, surrounded by silence. A silence broken only by that recurring sound, frost cracking like distant knuckles, preparing for a blow. The tribe insisted it was honor, but every footstep sounded like an executioner clearing his throat. As they reached the ridge, Sir looked down at the valley village, a scattering pale roofs, smoke rising in slow threads, the world she knew shrinking into insignificance. She wondered if anyone down there looked up, seeing a faint line of movement against the snow. She wondered if they recognized her silhouette, or if she had already become one of the forgotten shapes. Just another body on the mountain whose story would be absorbed by ice and silence. The elders waited at the clearing. Their faces were cut from stone, unmoved by the wind, as if the cold respected them too much to touch them. When they spoke, it wasn't to Sierra. It never was. They recited laws to the mountains themselves. They praised the ancestors. They invoked spirits that demanded trials, sacrifices, and suffering. And through it all, Sierra heard the frost beneath her feet cracking in soft, deliberate intervals, as if counting down. Tonight's trial was a full stillness, the cruelest version. No fire allowed within sight, no movement permitted once the ritual began, no voice raised unless in prayer. The elders claimed the cold stripped away leaves, and that a woman who could remain silent and motionless in the frozen dark proved she was pure enough for blessings. Blessings that the tribe desperately needed for fertility, fortune, and victory over rivals. The mountain spirits wanted quiet bodies, and so the elders delivered them. Sir knelt as instructed on the thin snow. It wasn't powder this close to the ridge. The wind scraped it down to a delicate crust. The frost greeted her again the moment her knees touched it. A fragile sound that contrasted painfully with Hewitt of what lay ahead. The cold seeped in instantly, sharp as needles. It would only worsen. She knew it. The elders knew it. Everyone who had ever watched a woman endure this knew exactly how the pain would creep and coil. But this moment, this very first sting, was when doubt hit hardest. Not doubt in herself, doubt in them, doubt in everything she had been told to accept. Why did a woman's worth depend on how long she could hold still while the cold gnawed through her bones? Why did Thealders never lie on this frozen ground? Why were the spirits so endlessly hungry for daughters but never for sons? Sarah clenched her jaw, tasting iron. The frost cracking under her shins continued like a slow heartbeat, too soft to be comforting, too constant to ignore. She knew the frost wasn't really speaking, yet somehow it was the only thing tonight that didn't feel like a lie. As the ritual began, the tribe formed a circle around her. No one touched her, that was forbidden, but their presence pressed on her harder than hands ever could. Torches flickered above, and their dim glow stretched the elder shadows over Sierra's body like long skeletal limbs. The elders began to chant, low, rhythmic, made to lull her into acceptance, but the chant sounded hollow, almost resentful, as if even the elders had grown tired of defending the cruelty they upheld. Sierra lowered her torso carefully until her back met the snow. The instant her skin reached it, the frost cracked again, sharp this time, like a sound of something tinny. She closed her eyes. Her breath formed brief clouds above her before vanishing into darkness. Beneath her, the frost continued its murmuring rhythm, each crack a reminder of everything she could lose before the night ended. She had heard the warnings: women fainting, freezing, or waking without feeling in their limbs, women collapsing days later, women who endured the full night but were never the same. The tribe insisted each outcome was meaningful, that the mountain always gave what was deserved. But Sarah Hoddleways suspected the truth, that it wasn't nature that judged them. It was the elders sheltered in warm homes using the mountain to enforce obedience. Her body trembled. The first tremor always came early. She pressed her teeth together to hide it. The tribe watched for weakness, claiming it meant impurity. The cold swelled against her spine. The frost cracked again, and through that rising pain, another thought struck her, one she wasn't supposed to have, one dangerous enough to merit exile as spoken out loud. Filda said the frost revealed a woman's true spirit, but maybe the frost was trying to reveal something far simpler, that no spirit, no body, no life should be forced into suffering for tradition's sake. That thought lingered, it grew, it pulled with each tiny crack beneath her. As the sky darkened, the wind sharpened, brushing her face like icy blades. She felt her heartbeat slow. She felt the cold sink deeper. She felt the presence of the tribe standing still around her, silent judges in the dim light. But she also felt this, an internal refusal, quiet but fierce. The trial wanted to take something from her, and the elders wanted her to give it willingly. The cold did not arrive all at once. It crept in stages. First a sting, then a numbness, then a kind of hollowing that felt almost spiritual. That creeping progression was the entire point of the ice endurance trial. Designed not to kill quickly, but to break slowly, Sarah lay perfectly still, as tradition demanded, feeling each stage unfurl inside her like unwelcome guests. And beneath it all, the frost continued its soft cracking beneath her shoulder blades, a faint reminder that the ground itself was recording every second of her suffering. The tribe insisted the trial was a sacred measure of bravery, but behind their hollow chants was a far older motive: control. The elders knew exactly what prolonged freezing did to the mind, how it stripped away certainty, how it rewired fear, how it made obedience seem like salvation. And as Sierra lay under the open sky, she realized the trial wasn't simply a ritual, it was a psychological cage. The wind crawled across her skin in thin needles. Her breath, once steady, now came in shallow clip bursts. Still, she didn't move, not even when her fingertips began to throb with a dull internal ache, the early bloom of frostbite. The villagers watching her kept perfectly silent. A woman enduring the ice trial was not allowed comfort. Comfort was a corruption. Only the cracking frost beneath her offered any sound, and even that was treated as part of the judgment. Sierra had been raised on stories claiming the mountain spirits listened for a woman's soul during the trial, that if a woman's inner fire burned strong, the cold would back away. If her spirit faltered, the frost would claim what it wished. But, lying here now, her body stiffening, her breath fading, she saw the truth behind the myth. The trial never belonged to the spirits. It belonged to the elders who needed a way to maintain authority by molding fear into faith and calling obedience a divine requirement. The mechanics of the ordeal were brutally simple. First, the woman was placed on a patch intentionally cleared of deep snow, exposing her to the thin crust that held the cold in sharpened layers. The tribe knew the crust cracked easily beneath weight. They claimed it symbolized the thinning barrier between body and spirit. In reality, the cracking made the cold seep in faster, reaching nerves before the mind could steel itself. Every crack was a tiny betrayal of the woman's flesh, an accelerated path to hypothermia. Second, the woman had to remain motionless. Movement meant disrespect. Even shivering, an involuntary survival response, was interpreted as weakness. A woman who trembled too early could be denied blessings for the rest of her life. Some were mocked, their futures condemned to the margins of the tribe. Others, unable to bear the shame, left the community entirely, and the elders allowed it. Exile was easier than reform. Third, the trial was always conducted at night, not because the spirits required darkness, but because its cold intensified by nearly half once the sun dropped behind the ridge. The elders had spent generations perfecting the conditions. A steady wind, a specific altitude, a patch of crusted frost whose cracking would echo clearly enough for observers to interpret. Every element was calculated. Nothing was spiritual. Everything was systematic. As the hours passed, Sierra felt her consciousness loosen, drifting between sharp awareness and heavy fog. Her ears filled with a faint ringing, an early sign of freezing blood thickening in thick. She felt it in her toes first, then her cheeks, then her fingertips, which stung with each pulse of her slowing heart. Beneath her, the frost cracked again, softer this time, as if muffled by her sinking weight. She thought of the girls who had endured this before her. She imagined their bodies rigid on the same slope, eyes wide with silent prayers no one ever answered. She wondered how many pretended to hear spirits just to avoid more trials, how many lied about revelations, how many claimed purity only to hide their terror. The elders praised obedience, but obedience here was forged from fear. That was the hidden mechanism. That was the truth the tribe refused to confront. The elders claimed the trial was crucial for fertility blessings. They believed the cold purified a woman's body, preparing her to bear children who would survive harsh winters. But Sarah had watched too many women who completed the ritual struggle with long-term illness. Some never regained full mobility in their limbs. Some never carried children at all. Yet, the tribe dismissed these outcomes as the spirit's will, never questioning the cost they demanded. Even more twisted was the tribe's claim that the trial assessed spiritual worth, as if worth could be measured by how long a woman suffered without protest, as if silence and agony equated to divine favor, as if endurance, not autonomy, made a soul valuable. Sarah felt her chest tighten. A deep chill settled around her lungs, making each inhale a fragile, cracking rhythm. Frost mirroring breath, breath mirroring. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, her vision blurred. Faces above her melted into indistinct shapes. But through the haze, she sensed something shifting among the elders. A tension awaiting because the trial had a final unspoken layer of cruelty, one known only to those who watched closely. The moment a woman neared collapse when her body reached the edge of freezing was the true test, not of her strength, but of her submission. If she passed out silently, her worth increased. If she carried out, even involuntarily, she was judged harshly. A single sound could change her entire future, and the elders watched Sarah now with predatory stillness, looking for that one slip, that one gasp, that one tremor out of place. The cold filled her joints like sand. Her body felt heavy, distant. Her breath grew thin. She felt her consciousness pulling away like a rope slipping from frozen fingers. The frost cracked again. The night pressed closer and the elders leaned forward slightly, waiting for the moment they believe it would reveal her spirit. But Sarah wasn't fading into silence. She was crossing a threshold, not spiritual, psychological, a realization taking shape behind her dimming eyes. This ritual was never about purity, it was about power. By the time the moon reached its highest point, Sarah's mind existed in fragments, sharp flashes of awareness followed by long, drifting voids. Her body had become an object of sensation rather than identity. Cold was no longer a force pressing against her skin. It was inside her, filling chest spaces where warmth once lived. Yet even in that half-conscious state, she felt the frost beneath her continuing to crack softly, rhythmically, insistently, as if it was speaking a message she wasn't supposed to hear. Around her, the tribe remained in formation. Torches flickered like dying stars. Shadows bent in crooked shapes over the ridge. The elders watched her without blinking, waiting to see which version of nature's verdict she would embody by dawn. But something was different tonight. Something none of them recognized yet. Sarah wasn't dying. She was transforming. It began with a flicker of clarity, a strange heat blooming somewhere deep inside her. Not physical heat. She had long since lost the ability to feel temperature in any normal sense. This was something else. A mental fire sparked by realization and fanned by the injustice coiled tightly around her whole life. The frost cracked again under her spine, louder this time, as if reacting to the shift inside her. For a moment Sierra wondered if she was hallucinating. Hypothermia could make the mind conjure entire worlds, warmth, voices, false safety. But this clarity wasn't warm. It wasn't comforting. It was sharp, cold, and precise. It cut through her confusion like a blade. She saw the elders for what they were, old men afraid of a world they could not control, clinging to rituals that demanded women suffer so they could sleep with the illusion of authority. She saw the villagers for what they had become, silent enforcers. To Terafito questioned the order it claimed to protect them, and she saw the mountain not as a sacred judge, but as a weapon wielded by human hands. Her vision sharpened, her breath steadied. The cold became background noise. Beneath her, the frost cracked once more, an almost defiant note, and then came the shock. A sudden gasp echoed across the ridge, not from Sir, from the eastern edge of the circle, where a young initiate, barely 14, stared at Sir with wide, terrified eyes. She had broken formation. She had stepped backward. Her torch wavered in her grip. The elders turned sharply toward the girl, their stone masks cracking for the first time that night. Fear, real fear, because no one, not even a child, ever reacted during the trial. They watched, they obeyed, they remained silent. Sarah, half-conscious, didn't yet understand what the girl saw, but the elders did. Whispers rippled through the watching villagers. Torches dipped. Several people shifted uneasily, and then one elder stepped forward, his voice cold and brittle as the frost beneath Sir. She is resisting the freeze. The phrase meant one thing: spiritual danger. A woman who resisted death in such conditions was rare. Too rare. It suggested her spirit was strong enough to defy the mountain's will, and while the tribe publicly pretended such strength was a blessing, privately, the elders feared it. A woman who survived too easily could not be controlled. Another elder knelt beside Sir, not to comfort her but to check her breath. The rise and fall of her chest, the pour off her skin. His fingers trembled when he withdrew his hand. She is not fading. A murmur spread. People shifted closer. The frost cracked beneath Sir again, sharp enough to echo. The initiate girl whispered, voice trembling. She's breathing stronger. She shouldn't be. And that's when Sir felt it. Something moving inside her awareness. A memory not of warmth or home, but of something her mother once whispered on a winter night long ago. When the frost speaks to you, don't fear it. Fear the ones who tell you what the frost means. The memory slammed into her with the weight of revelation. Her mother had endured the trial. She had survived. But afterward her eyes had held a quiet rebellion Sir never understood until now. The frost wasn't judging her. It was warning her. The elders sensed the shift. Their chants faltered. Their composure cracked, because if Sir did the impossible, if she survived with her consciousness intact, it would expose a truth they'd hidden for centuries. This endurance trial wasn't a spiritual test. It was a biological torture that many could survive if not for the terror and lies layered upon it. A woman surviving with clarity could dismantle everything. And then came another shock, unpredictable and irreversible. A second woman stepped out of the circle, not the initiate. An older woman, a mother of 3, known for strict loyalty to the elders, stepped forward with trembling shoulders. She stared at Sir, at the frost cracking beneath her, at the breath that refused to fade, and she whispered the unthinkable. I survived, too. Gasps exploded through the ridge like an avalanche. The elders whipped toward her, horrified. The villagers recoiled because admitting survival meant she had concealed it for years. It meant she had lied to protect herself. It meant she had seen through the ritual long ago. And it meant the Kryle's authority had just fractured. The elders barked orders, trying to regain control. They demanded silence. They called her a blasphemer. They declared, "Sir, spirit touched, a danger, a possible curse." But panic had already seeped into the crowd, thawing decades of fear. The older woman shook her head slowly. "No spirit spared me. My own body did. The cold doesn't judge. You judge." Her breath steamed into the night. The frost cracked again, an echo of liberation. For the first time, the villagers looked at the trial with doubt rather than reverence. Some lowered their torches. Some stepped back. The initiate girl dropped hers entirely. The elders shouted louder now, desperate, furious. But the mountain ridge felt different. The ritual atmosphere had ruptured, and Sarah, still frozen to the ground, still drifting in and out of consciousness, felt the shift as a pulse inside her chest. Something had broken. Something had awakened. The truth was out too suddenly, too loudly, irreversibly, and the elders knew it, because every oppressive system survives by keeping the frost quiet. Tonight, the frost spoke, and the mountain would never be the same. Dawn arrived slowly, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise over what had been exposed on the ridge. The tribe stood in fractured clusters, no longer a unified circle of watchers, but a collection of individuals suddenly aware of their own trembling breath. The torches had burned low. The chants had died. The silence, once ritualistic, now felt dangerous, volatile, alive. And beneath Sir's motionless body, the frost cracked one more time. A soft, brittle sound. Not a warning now, but the mountain had always been honest. It was people who twisted its voice. When Sir opened her eyes, she saw not spirits or visions, but human faces. Conflicted, fearful, changed. The cold still clung to her bones, but her mind was steady, sharper than it had been before the ordeal began. The shock of her survival, her clarity, had already rippled to the tribe with the force of a landslide. She tried to sit up. Pain flared sharply along her limbs, but she managed. Gasps rushed across the ridge. Some villagers reached as if to help her, but stopped halfway, unsure if touching her meant breaking tradition or stepping into a new world entirely. Even the elders flinched back, their robes rustling like startled wings. They had never prepared for this outcome. A woman surviving with full consciousness meant something they could not afford. Proof that the trial's spiritual framework was a fabrication. Their authority hung by a fraying thread, and every breath Sir Drew pulled it tighter. The elder chief, voice unsteady for the first time in living memory, stepped forward. "You should not be awake." It wasn't accusation. It was fear disguised as command. Sir's voice emerged raw, cracked, shaped by cold and clarity. "I should not have been forced to lie here." The sentence drifted through the cold air like smoke curling around every listener. Women in the crowd shifted. Men stared at the ground. Even the initiate girl lifted her head, eyes shining with something dangerously close to hope. The elder chief raised a shaking hand as if he could push her words back into her chest. "The mountain judges all." "No, Zero said softly. "You judge. The frost only listens." A murmur rippled outward, touching every corner of the ridge. It was not rebellion yet, but it was the birthplace of one. And what mattered most, what truly marked the end of the trials, unquestioned rule, was not Sarah's survival. It was the unstoppable sequence of realizations her survival ignited, because every oppressive system thrives on predictability. It relies on cause and effect. If you obey, you live. If you resist, you fall. But Sarah had shattered the equation. Women who had once bowed their heads now lifted them. Men who had once recited ritual lore now blinked as if waking from a long dreamless sleep. Even the elders' shadows seemed shorter in the rising light. Sir stood up, unsteady but defiant. The cold echoed inside her bones, but it no longer ruled her. She noticed something then. Thin cracks of frost clinging to her skin, patterned like lines of script. Tiny crystalline fractures where she had lain. She brushed them away, and with each falling flake, the tribe watched a symbol of authority crumble. Behind her, the older woman who had spoken out stepped forward again. Her breath trembled, but not with fear. "This time, we were told to be silent, but silence is not truth." A collective exhale tightened the air. The elders reacted as they always did when losing control, with volume, furious, frantic proclamations about the spirits, about punishment, about consequences. But their words bounced hollowly off the cold air. And each time the elders raised their voices, someone in the crowd looked away instead of bowing. Someone else stepped back instead of kneeling. Tradition, once unbreakable, had begun to fracture. Sir walked past the elders. No one stopped her. No one dared. She moved slowly, frost cracking beneath her with each step like a quiet applause. People whispered her name. Some touched their own arms where frost scars from her literals still lingered. A few began to cry softly, quietly, as if tears themselves were forbidden, and maybe they had been. When Sierra reached the trail leading down the ridge, she paused. The village below looked different now. Not smaller, not insignificant, but unmasked. She could see every roof, every footpath, every home where women were told their worth depended on how much pain they endured in silence. She understood then the ice endurance trial wouldn't vanish overnight. Systems built on suffering rarely dissolve quickly. But this moment, this morning, would echo. It would spread. A fracture in the foundation of ritual cruelty had formed, and frost cracks only ever deepened with time. She turned back to the gathered villagers. Her voice was quiet, but steady. No more nights on the ice. The words were simple, but they were the kind that could outlive a generation. As she took her first step down the mountain, many followed. Not in a crowd, not in rebellion, but in awakening. The older woman, the initiate girl, several men, and others who had no words, but knew something monumental has shifted within them. Behind them, the elders shouted after the retreating figures. Threats, curses, warnings. But the frost beneath their feet cracked too, betraying them, echoing their fear. Because cruelty always fears being seen clearly. And now, for the first time, the ridge was illuminated. Years later, stories of that night would circulate quietly among the mountain families. Some exaggerated Sierra into a mythical figure. Others whispered Thatch had been touched by the frost spirit itself. But the truth was far simpler and far more human. A woman saw the machinery of cruelty for what it was, and refused to let it define her. And that's the haunting echo of this story. Not the cold, not the trial, but the system behind it. The one that demanded obedience and blamed nature for its own violence. These structures still exist today in echoes and shadows. Whenever fear disguises itself as tradition, whenever suffering is labeled spiritual, whenever a voice is silenced for convenience. And so the question lingers. How many rituals in our world still hide their cruelty beneath a language of purity? If you felt the chill of that truth, stay with us in the Crimson Archive. We uncover the stories meant to be buried, the histories wrapped in silence, the systems that hoped the frost would keep their secrets. Subscribe now and let's continue tearing open the darkness, one story at a